So, welcome back to another how-to video. This is part of our Google Draw series that we're doing in class. So, we're going to do, or what you're going to do, is two assignments that then you would be able to use on a HyperDoc. And we are going to create both of them in Google Draw. And then the third choice can be yours from any tool that we've learned so far. So the example I'm going to use is the one that you see on your screen now called Name That Planet. It doesn't, it is an example. You do not have to use this one in your planning. And of course, this one fits in with grade 6 science. So if you are planning on using it, you should be a grade 6 science teacher. Okay, so anyways, this is what it will look like generally in the finished product. So what then, of course, we need to do is we need to go to our drive, and what you'll do is you will go to New, and you will go to More, and then you'll slide over and you'll go to Google Drawings. Okay, now you may or may not get this message, but again, it's just because I'm creating it in a shared folder. It's just warning me that it'll be shared. So I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead. Okay, and then one of the first things, obviously, that we need to do is we need to rename it. So I will call it Name That Planet. And I'm just going to throw in my name in there as well. Okay, and then, of course, just hit enter or return. And it's saving it automatically like it does all other Google stuff. And then another thing that we need to do, a really important thing we need to do, is we need to go down from File and then go to Page Setup. Okay, and then when we click it, it will show you, even though maybe on your screen, this looks like a fairly large area. What we have to do is think about is sort of what is the final size that we want this to be, and whether we are printing it out for our students to have or we're using it as a digital copy. Now, in our case here, this is going to be a digital assignment. Now, it's a really simple assignment, and you certainly could add more to it, but this will give you definitely the basics of Google Draw. And then if there's anything, fancier kind of things that you might be thinking that you'd like to do, then we can always figure that out together in class. Okay, so so again, back to the page setup. Again, you have to think about the orientation. Is it going to be portrait or landscape? And then what size of paper are you going to be able to, or create this on? And if we think about standard photocopiers, we're thinking about 8.5 by 11, which is just a regular sheet of paper. 8.5 by 14, which is they call that legal, and it's kind of the longer sheet. And then there's a gigantic sheet, which is equal to 2 pages of 8.5 by 11 paper, which is 11 by 17. And those are probably the 3 typical sizes that a photocopier at a school would be able to handle and manage. Okay. Now, again, because this assignment is going to be just all done digitally online, because it's just a drag and drop assignment where they would drag the correct planet to the correct statement. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves a little bit more real estate in on our page. So if you just click this standard 4x3, and we're going to just change it to custom. Okay, so you can see that the standard is 10 by 7.5, which is not even quite the standard 8.5 by 11. So what we're going to do, and because I also want this assignment in landscape orientation, we are going to, instead of it being 11 by 17, well, we're just going to have to make it 17 by 11. Okay, so if we enter those numbers here, okay, so it's 17 by 11 inches. And then when we hit OK, you'll see our canvas will change a little bit, but there won't be a big significant change. So I'll hit OK, and it gives us this. So that will be the printed out size. Okay. Another way that you can change the size of your page is by clicking on this area down here, this little kind of striped area down here in the bottom corner. And of course, you could make things drag things around to be any size you want them to be. The only problem with that is then right now, I actually have no idea what the actual size is. So even at that, I would still need to go back to file page setup and make sure that these numbers work. Okay. Now, again, that's not the size I want. Although it looks big on the screen, it's not what we need as a size here. So again, it's going to be 17 by 11. And then now we're ready to start. So our first element that we're going to add is a text box right here called Name That Planet. So all we need to do is go to the text box tool here. And then when we move on to our canvas, which is this gray and white checkered area, if you click, hold, and drag, it will give you a transparent text box. So if we were to type in Name That Planet, okay, if we had a colored background or some other type of image here as our background, then it would show through on our text box. Okay, so, and you can always change the color of your background by just right-clicking on the canvas and say background, and then it gives you different choices here that you can do. And then also, as a consideration, is if you are printing it with a white background is probably going to be your better bet than printing it out with a colored background, which would use lots of toner or ink from your inkjet printer. So anyways, we are here in this text box. And so if we highlight this, now again, this is a really big piece of paper, the same size as two pieces of regular paper, side by side. So we're going to choose a font, okay, and you can take as much time as you want to choose a font, but we're going to have to make it really big. And even at this font at 96 point is not that big. I think I'll just go with Quicksand like I did in the example. And what I'll do is I will just make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so one of the things I'd like you to do in all of the text boxes is once you have your font and your size and all of that picked out, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to come up to the align tools and choose center alignment. So that's horizontally. And then the other one would be center in the middle vertically. Okay. That also gives us the opportunity to resize our text box just a little bit, keeping things kind of nice and tidy and being sort of efficient with our space. All right. So then once I have that sort of done, there's two things that you'll notice with the text box. One is that if you click in the text box, your insertion point, or we call it a cursor, right, will actually start flashing. If you want to type in there, that's great. But if you want to do anything with the actual shape itself, you have to kind of click on the border line that it has. And you can see now that the insertion point is not clicking or flashing, inside the text box. And that's a good thing because we want to manipulate the text box, not the text. So with that done now, what you can do is you can choose the paint bucket and you can choose a color to start your activity with. And I can use the same colors that I used in my previous one, or you could use whatever colors you want. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my primary color for this shape. And then if you look at the example, I also gave it a nice border around. Okay, and so again, the shape is selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually work backwards from here to here to here. Okay, so the first big decision about your borders that you got to make is what type of line, right? Is it solid? Is it dotted? Is it dashed? Is it a combination? I'm going to go with, and I played with all of these for my my final product, and I just liked solid the best. So that's choice number one. Choice number two is what size should that line be? I would recommend somewhere between 3 and 4 pixels. In my example, I used a 4-pixel line. And then my last major decision here is what color do you want it to be? And you can never go wrong with black. But again, choose complementary colors that kind of work together. And you'll notice that we picked from this row, all of the colors in this row are considered complementary colors. And in my final example, you can see that those are actually the colors I used for my text boxes. Okay, so what I've got now is a text box that looks something like that. And so one of the ways I might want to move it just a little bit. And one of the things that you can do is obviously you can click and drag it. Okay, and you can also use your arrow keys to move it down. Okay, and then you can also use your shift key. If you hold your shift key down and use your arrows, what you'll see is it'll move the shape or the object just a little bit compared to just a regular arrow key like this now, right? It moves it quite a bit, and then shift and arrow moves it just a little bit. So once you kind of get things close to where you want them, you can use the shift and the arrow key to kind of just nudge it just a little bit at a time. So that looks pretty good. I might move it up just a smidge more, so that's about the same distance from the edge here and this edge. And that's pretty close. That's close enough. Okay, so and then the other thing we have to consider about colors and fonts and stuff like that is, remember, light on dark or dark on light. So we don't want to have fonts and background colors that are close, similar in color, because they're really hard then to discern for kids. Okay, so we need a your name box, and we need a remember box. And in class, I asked, what does this MVEM, what is this? And the answer is, it's a mnemonic device that we can use to remember the order of the planets from Mars all the way to Pluto. And remember, it's my very earthly mother just stole us 9 pizzas, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is we will make these 2 text boxes right now. And you can see I followed the same thing that I did with the big text box here. Is I've got a colored background, a border line, and the same font and all that kind of stuff. So that's exactly what I'm going to do on this sheet. Is I'm going to choose a text box, and I'm going to, we'll start with that size. We might change it after. We'll just say your name here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that text, and I want to make it the same font that I used in the kind of the title, right? And that's, again, we've got a really big space here, so I can use some bigger fonts, and I'm going to make it bold, and then I'm going to work my way back over here and make it, I don't need to make it centered, but I'm going to center it vertically. Okay, so it's nice and centered in that box. And this box we're actually going to want to leave big, well, unlike this one where we kind of scrunched it down a little bit so that students can actually come in here and type their name. Okay, but again, we need to give it a color. So again, following my rule, I'm going to follow just along this row here and give it that color. And then again, big decisions about the borders. My advice would be kind of keep them similar, so that you'll get a similar look here. Okay. Now I'm going to teach you a trick. Now again, of course, obviously, if I wanted to have a text box, I could go to the text box tool and recreate this. But once you have an object on your screen that is formatted and colored, and the way that you want it, what you can do, obviously, you could copy and paste it if you wanted another copy of this. But the other trick that you can use, if you're on a PC keyboard, you could use Control V or Control D, to duplicate, or if you're on a Mac, you could use Command D. So here's, if I go Control D, it creates a duplicate copy of that text box. And my advice when you use it, we're using the duplicate tool, as soon as you create your duplicate, use your arrow keys just to get it out of the way of the other one, because sometimes you might have a problem selecting or grabbing one or the other. And then the other thing that you can see that's going on here is I've got some red lines on my screen that's showing me that the second text box is centered perfectly with the one above it, and that the bottom edge for this text box kind of lines up proportionally to the bottom of the title text box. So I'm going to leave it at that. The only thing different that I'm going to do is I'm not going to have the same color or the same name. So if we go to our thing here, it was just this title here, right? And I'm going to cheat just a tiny bit if I can and copy that and then go back over here, and I'm gonna I'm just gonna put, I'll type it, remember, and then rate my very earthly mother just stole us 9 pizzas. Okay, and so then it again is looking like this, and the only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to use the paint can to give me a different color. Okay, and you can make them, again, you can choose whatever colors you like. All right, so we've got that part done. Now we need an instruction box to give them instructions. In our next and the second assignment, what we'll be doing is we'll be putting the instructions off the canvas so that if you do print it, the instructions are not on the canvas, and that gives students more room to work, right? So again, I'm going to create another text box, and I am just going to use my plus sign cursor here just to try and line things up a little bit. I'll show you how to line things up a little bit better after, okay? So in here, we're going to put in our instructions, and this time I am going to cheat just to save us time. I'm just going to paste those in there now. And again, what I'm going to do is with all of this text, I am going to make sure that I've got the right font, and probably go with, let's see, what is an 8? No, maybe make it bigger, 24 point. Yeah, go with a 24 point font. And then, of course, if you wanted it bold, you can. But the only other thing I'm going to do is, I actually don't really need this one centered, but I am going to center it that way so that I can scrunch my text box down a little bit and then also make it about that width. And then, of course, I'm going to give it a color again. So I'm going to fill it in with the next color over, which on my palette is green. Okay, and that still works really good. And I just want, again, I'm going to add my border. And since I've already got my colors picked out for that, I'm not going to change them. I'm just going to add my border like that. Okay, so I'm going to show you the first thing. Now, you can pretty much eyeball this one. It's not too bad because we can drag it and it will show me if it's lined up. You know, these two edges are lined up. But one of the other things that you can do is if I click on this shape, and I click on, and I hold down the shift key, and I click on this shape, what happens is that both of them are selected, and that's called shift clicking. Okay, and then what you can do is go up to the arrange menu, and then what you could do is you can say, if they're kind of messed up, you could say arrange center, left, or right. And I want to, obviously in this case, I want to align them on their left-hand edge. So I'm going to click that. And because we already sort of did it, nothing miraculous happened. But I do know that everything along this edge right now is nice and even. Okay. So back to our sort of exemplar is you're going to need 5 kind of statements or hints, if you want to call them hints, for your planets. And then I did also add this rule on here, is that because this is kind of like a matching activity, right? So one of the rules with matching activities, tests, quizzes, or anything like that is that you always have more answers than you do questions. And what that allows you to do, or what it prevents happening, is students sort of narrowing it down by guessing, because now they got different choices, right? So anyways, in good test making, that's a tip that you can put in your pocket there to remember later on sometime. Okay, so what I'm going to do on my sheet is I'm going to create one box, and then I am going to duplicate 4 more. Okay, so let's do that again together. And so one more time that I'm going to create a text box, and I'm just going to, this time I'm not going to try to line it up on the edge, because then I want to show you how the arrange tool really works really nicely. So probably about that size to start off with. And again, you can, because we're doing the planets, you can have any hints you want. I am just going to borrow the ones that I did in this other assignment and paste them in. So again, the process is going to be exactly the same as we've used for all the other ones. I'm going to make sure that it is centered and centered this time. And I'm going to scrunch it down, oops, just a little bit, and a little bit more from top to bottom, right? So I'm going to get this one the way that I want it, and then I'm going to duplicate it. So I've got my font. No, I don't actually. Or do I? No, I want this to be Quicksand again, and I want it to be 24, and that just means I'll just have to make my text box a little bit bigger. There we go. I think that's pretty close to where we want it. All right, and then again, we're going to use a fill color. So green was the last one I used. Again, you can use any colors you want. And then I'm just going to add my border of 4-point border. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So now what I want you to do is I want you to duplicate this. And then again, use your arrow keys just to get it out of the way, and duplicate again. Get it out of the way. And one more, and last one. Okay, so now you can see that I've got five of them, just like in the example. And what we can do in here now, the only thing that, well, we're going to change the text obviously, but the only thing that really needs to change is our fill-in color, right? So if we go here and I choose the next blue, and I come to here and I choose, what do I got? I'm going to go purple so we don't have blues too close together. And then I'm going to go with another. I'm going to go with this yellow again, or yellow orange, whatever color it is. And then for this one, I'm going to go back to green. Okay, and you can again use whatever colors you want. All right. So before I start typing in them, what I'm going to do is, so remember last time we had a shape selected and we held down the shift key and went click, 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 and click, and that selects them all. One of the ways to select multiple objects on the screen is just to click and hold, and you can drag this box around the stuff that you want to select, and then when you let go, they're all selected. Okay? So what we can do now is we can go to the Arrange menu, and we can say Align horizontally along the left edges. Now this one is going to be very noticeable. Okay, and I see how it snaps them all nice in order. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my arrow key, and I'll get it closer. Actually, I didn't really need to do that. Let me just put it back there. And if I also then shift and click this one, then I can go Arrange again, and I can go left-hand edges. So again, I know that it's nice and spread out. Now, one thing that you can see is that I made my boxes a little bit bigger here so they'd fill the page. You could do that as well if you wanted. Again, if I grab them all, and then let's see if I can do this. I can drag it a little bit bigger, and it makes all of those boxes a little bit bigger. Okay, and you can sort of decide on your spacing that you want. Just think of these shapes over here. They're going to need, your students are going to need a little bit of room to be able to kind of drag these over to the right spot. Okay, and so with that, what I'm going to do is I am just going to click on that and move it down with my arrow key, and then I'll show you another trick. So I don't have to get too close here on trying to eyeball them with my arrow keys or by clicking and dragging. Okay, so even with that done, I'll just move this one down a couple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all again. And then one of our other arrange tools that we can use is here where it says distribute. And what we want to do is distribute them evenly on the vertical. Okay, so if I click that, now it's separated them apart. Okay, so that's kind of what I've done here to try to make some room for them to be able to drag the correct planets over. All right, so the next big thing that we need to do is we need to create these planet boxes, and I'll show you one, but then I'm not going to do them all in the video just so that, because the process will be the exact same for the rest of them, and then you can just choose what planets and what images you use. Okay, so Mars was my first one up that I did. So what I'll do is I want to add a picture of Mars. Okay, now, well, you know, one of the other things we could do, I'm just thinking about space here. Well, let me add the Mars picture first, and then I'll decide. Okay, so what we really are simply going to do is I'm just going to open up a new tab, and I am actually just going to type in Mars, and then I'll just type in planet just so I don't get other things. As a search, I'm going to search for images. Okay, and one of the other things that I'm going to do is I'm going to choose tools, and I'm going to go more tools in my search and go show sizes, because I just want to be cognizant of the sizes of my shapes. And what we're going to do also is you can see that this one obviously is in landscape, long and skinny, but yet this one is kind of more square, or maybe it's in portrait. Okay, is I want you to try to choose whichever planets you actually consider using. I want you to choose similar shapes, kind of like what I did here. Saturn is a tough one because it's kind of really a big planet with the rings, and it's really hard to find kind of like a square one for Saturn. So if you choose Saturn, just be aware of that. Okay, and then I just want to choose one that might be about the right size. I'm going to go with, well, this one is nice and square, so I'm going to choose it because it's 430 by 430. Okay, and then from here, we quite literally are going to just go right click, copy image. We're going to go back to our sheet, and we're going to right click and paste. Okay, now obviously that's much, much bigger than we need. So again, to proportionally resize the shape, you can just grab on any of the corners, and remember those dots are called handles. So if you grab on any corner handle, what you'll get is a nice proportional shape instead of, let me just redo that. If you grab here, then you're kind of going, oh, well, I mean, is that about right or whatever? So, oops, if you grab on the corner, you don't have to worry about doing two adjustments. Okay, so I'm going to think to sort of put this side by side, maybe make it just a tiny bit smaller. Okay, so then what I'm going to try to do once I am I'm selecting my other shapes is I'm going to try not only to select the similar shapes, but also I'm going to try to make them all the same size. Okay, with, again, the exception of this one, but that one's a tough one. Okay, so if I go back here, I've got my planet, I've got my size, but I need to label it with Mars. So what I'm going to do is, and it's probably not a big, mind blower here, but I'm just going to throw on a text box, and I'm going to type in Mars. Okay, and then I'm going to select that text in there, and because these are all going to be kind of on black backgrounds, I'm going to make my text white. Okay, and then this is a pretty small font. We could probably make it a little bit bigger. And then again, what I want to do is I want to, on this one, it's kind of going to be important. We want to center and center. And then I want to, this one I really, really want to make sure that the text box is not much bigger than the text that's inside it. And then on this one, I really am going to use the arrow keys to line things up. And now you can see I'm getting close to the edge there. So I'm going to hold the shift key down again. And I'll just inch it over a little bit, maybe about like that. Okay, so what I recommend now is if I hold the shift key down and click the planet, they're both selected. I'm just going to move that one away for a second. And I'm going to use it sort of as my template one. Okay, so I'm going to do one more. And in my example, what was my second one? I might be a planet and I might not. Okay, so let me just grab that text. So I'll copy it, come here, and I'm going to paste. Okay, and again, I'm having some font problems here, so I got to make sure I have the right font. There we go. Okay, and then for this one, the answer is Pluto. So if we come back up here and just in our search bar, type in Pluto, Again, remember our last size was around 626 by 626. So it is not critical that you find one exactly the same size, because you probably won't. But if you can find one that's square, and I'm going to actually choose this one because I'll teach you another thing here. If you can find one that's square, what you can do then is you can crop it. Okay. Now, it doesn't really matter what size it is. I might actually choose this one for now. Okay. And if I right click it again and I copy it and I come back to my canvas and I paste it, okay, it's going to come in really big, and that's okay. So this is, I don't really actually, well, I'll crop it just a tiny bit. You see how close the black edges are to the planet Mars here? So if I double click the picture, you can see how it gives us some other little handles here. And on this one, I am going to slide it over a little bit, down a little bit, and I'm just going to do that all the way around. Yeah, I could have grabbed the corners, but this is a little bit more fine tuning, so I'm going to do that. And once you have it about where you want it, you just hit enter or return, and it crops it. And now what I need to do is I need to make that shape about the same shape and size as this one. And this is how I do it. I just kind of line them up a little bit. There's probably some other better way to do that, but that's how I do it. Okay, so that's about right. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to click on the Mars box, and I'm going to hit Control D for duplicate, and then I'm going to use my arrow keys again just to line that up a little better. So that's probably about right. And then obviously inside it, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to name it Pluto. Okay, and with that done, I can actually scrunch that down a little bit so that, again, these text boxes, are not too big. So if I click off of it, that looks pretty good. So now that I've got this one, remember I'm going to use this one as my master for now. I can select the text box, and if I shift and hold down again, and I click the planet, it gives us both of them, right? So what I want to do now is I want to go to arrange, and I want to go to group. Now the other way to do this, sorry, let me just select that again. There's another way to do this. If I right click on it, I can also group. And you can see that the other arranging tools there's lots of them here too. So, but this time I just want to group. And then it's probably a good idea not to keep the correct answers right beside the actual, hint box. So I'll separate those out a little bit. So this one's done. And why we group them is because if I drag this now, the words and the planet come together. Where on this one, where it's not grouped, if I drag Mars, it leaves that text box behind, and it's really hard to find after. So if I just go Control Z, I'll put that back. So that's why it's just going to be my master, because I want to keep dragging this or grabbing this text box. So I don't know, maybe I'll put it right there. And then again, I'll line it up. You see how it's lining up with my red lines? I'm not really worried about the horizontal line, but I want it to line up with my other planets in here. And I might have to do some adjustments after I add another one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video. And what you can do is you can add the rest of your planets. Remember, we've got 5 hints, and we need, well, I've got 7 here, so at least 6 different planets that you can figure out where you want to put them. And then we'll come back and we can sort of just finish this off. All right? Okay, I'll talk to you in a minute or two. See now is that I'm pretty much done. And you can see that I've added a few extra planets on here. I just wanted to balance things out a little bit. So I've got everything grouped nicely together. I still don't have Mars done yet, or I do have Mars selected, and I want to select the planet to grab them both. And then, of course, I want to group them. And so what I would recommend is that you just do a quick drag test, is that you drag it and make sure that the words come along with the planet, and then you can just go Control Z to move it back, right? So that you can do that with all of yours, just to, like I said, to do the drag test. The other thing, again, that I want to do with these planets, I've got them as close as I can to being probably about the shape that I want for each one. So again, you can either, I'm just going to do shift click on all of them. And so what I want to do here is I just want to distribute these vertically again so that there's the same space between each planet. So again, arrange, distribute vertically. So that spaces them out nicely that way. And then I'll click, hold, and drag these ones. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to arrange them and distribute them vertically. Okay, so you can see that I didn't finish off my text, but that's okay. And what I would like you to do here is that if you were going to, depending on how you deliver this to the students, if you were to share it through Classroom though, as an assignment, then what you'd want to do is you want to make sure that you set it up so that they get a copy of this document. Or if you were sharing it just through the link under share, right, and you go anybody with a link can view, remember that link has to end in, let me just copy this for a second and show you a little trick here, right, is that if I paste that link in now and see where it says / edit USP equals sharing, I'm going to get rid of that. And if you type in the word copy and then hit enter, what it does is it will force them to make a copy. So if you're sharing the link, now you'd share this link that ends in copy instead. But if you do it through Classroom, Classroom has a way of doing it by itself. Okay, so there's another little trick for you. All right, so basically this assignment is done, with the exception, again, on mine, I didn't finish these clues off. And I'll do that right. So anyways, I've got them all set up now. I just grabbed all of these hints. I mean, some of them I knew. I didn't know. I thought actually that Saturn had more than 62 or less than 62 moons. But when I Googled it, I found out that it did. So again, you can just sort of, I mean, you can search them. This is NASA's website. It's whatever, however you want to find them. It's up to you. Anyways, this is your assignment. And then again, your directions and all of that, and you should be good. And like with any of these things, if you have any questions while you're doing it or after you're doing it, don't hesitate to see me in class, drop me a text or an email. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.